So, hello everyone, and yes, thank you for inviting me to come over and talk to you about the report writing in the EU, which I was asked to do and which really is a big, big task. We will see why later on, and so I choose just to talk about it from the perspective of the European Fibers Group, because to talk for all the trace evidence groups in Europe, that would be would have been not possible. So report writing in the EU, I will briefly go over the following. I want to talk a little bit about the situation in Europe, the role of Nfc, which is a European network of forensic science institutes, and also I want to talk about the tendencies we found within the European Fibers Group, which yes, changed over the last couple of years. Looking at the map, I think you can see that the European Network of Forensic Science Institutes holds quite a number of institutes all over Europe. All the Nfc members are about 61 institutes originating from 34 countries, speaking 30 different languages and having different legal systems, which is quite a difficulty to come to terms with. Additionally, we have associate members in our working groups. Associate members are not part of the European of Nfc, but the different working groups like fibers, paint and glass can have associate members in the working groups, and they come from Australia, Canada, other European countries as well, Israel and the United States. So the question is, common language English? Yes, when we meet up, our common language is English, but when we write reports, the country's language is the language you have to choose, and that causes a number of problems you can imagine probably. So looking at this other map and looking at the small arrows on the right-hand side, you probably can see here that not even the characters used here are the same, because the Russian people use completely different characters, so it's quite difficult to find a common understanding. Nfc, about the role of Nfc. The mission statement of Nfc is that Nfc has been established with the purpose of sharing knowledge, exchanging experiences, and coming to mutual agreements in the field of forensic science. So the aim is that Nfc is recognized as a preeminent voice in forensic science worldwide by ensuring the quality of development and delivery of forensic science throughout Europe. It will be therefore strengthen and consolidate Nfc, expand the membership throughout Europe by maintaining the development and credibility of Nfc, establish and maintain a working relationship with other similar organizations, and encourage all Nfc laboratories to comply with best practice and international standards for quality and competence assurance. So what is the general intention regarding report writing? To harmonize the scale of conclusion, to implement an approach for evaluation of evidence, to educate the employees on the subject, and to inspire the employees on the subject as well. So I've chosen to show you two different samples. One of these examples is originating from the UK, the other is from Germany. The D is Germany and not Denmark, so it's related to the car number plates. We have all to identify our country when we have our cars on the streets. So you can see on the left-hand side the UK example, which originates from Ray Palmer. So the structure is qualifications and experience in formation received, continuity, purpose, technical issues, examination and results, interpretation and conclusion. On the right-hand side, you see a sample from our laboratory. material received, material assessment, examination, order and purpose, methods, technical issues, information received, examination and results, interpretation and conclusion. That differs slightly, but in general terms, I think we do the same. And I think that's a mutual agreement throughout the whole European Fibers Group community that these things have to be addressed. The only thing which is questionable, I think, is that some of the laboratories, the smaller laboratories, really do interpretation and conclusion. I think they tend to just deliver the examination results, and we will come to that later on again. So what is the role of the expert? That's a question in total. State bare facts, interpret analytical results, spectra, discuss error rates, etc., or also interpret the evidence on a source level, and in addition interpret the evidence on the activity level. You can see again from the chart on the right hand side that the answers to that all over Europe are as diverse as the countries the laboratories originate from. So in forensic investigation, we have to deal with facts. And we examine facts and do some interpretation afterwards and draw our conclusions. Then a report is written, or probably also oral stated, and the most important thing, in our opinion, is that the reporting is done with transparency. This is an approach also the Swedish laboratory and Linköping in Sweden does, and I've chosen also to implement some of their ideas. So this is also an example how they put up their different levels. It's a 9-scale level, and they use that since a couple of years in different areas of trace evidence. It's just one possibility, but I want to show you what's going on across Europe. The Swedish laboratory calls it also a likelihood approach. It is also called a logical approach, and it is based on the Bayes rules. Ray Palmer already talked about that during the meeting. And I will give you a short example how that probably works out, and how, yes, we can handle cases with get a little bit more information. In this case example, the victim was attacked by an offender from behind, and as a result, we found a number of fibers originating most likely from the different textiles in question. The blue arrows show the transfer of fibers originating from the guys' textiles and garments, and the red arrows show the transfer of fibers originating from the ladies' textiles and garments. The numbers in brackets indicate the findings on the backside of the garments, and looking at that, so one could probably draw the conclusion that there might have been a cross-transfer of fibers. Just looking at the chart, it could have been a little bit misleading, and looking at it in a little bit more detail brings us to another conclusion. So we tried to fit the results into the actions taking place on the scene, and discussed what we expected as a fiber distribution on the textiles. And looking what happened, what supposedly happened on the scene, we would have expected that the fibers originating from the ladies' garments would have been found on the front side of the guys' garments, including probably the lower sleeves. The found distribution showed a little bit otherwise. Most of the fibers originating from the skirt of the girl showed on the backside of the guy's trousers, and this seemed a little bit suspicious. Otherwise, let's see. Otherwise, we also found a couple of fibers here in the front area, but not as many as we expected. So we thought about the possibility that packaging could have caused a redistribution, but that seemed a little bit unlikely in total, because the backside was quite full of fibers from the skirt. So then we looked at the ladies' garments, and so what we expected was that we should find the most fibers on the back of the jacket and on the back of the skirt. And looking at the results, the expected fiber distribution was partly in accordance to what we expected. Oops. Partly in accordance to what we expected. I'm fighting a bit in this area here, but there were also fibers missing on the back of the jacket. So that left us with a couple of questions. So the question was, what to do now? Paul Kirk said that all the responsibility of medicine, the intricacy of the law, and the universality of science, inasmuch as it carries higher penalties for error than other professions, it is not a matter to take lightly, nor to trust to luck. So therefore, we asked ourselves, what do we expect the expert to do in such a situation? State that there is a disagreement between location of findings and the victim's stated case history, which needs further discussion. That would have been one option. We could have left the statement out, but otherwise we felt the obligation to include that. To leave you not in the dark, I wanted to show you what actually happened from crime scene to laboratory, because it was discussed in court. And what you can see is that the guy in question was transported in a police car to the police station. After that, the police car returned, and the girl was transported, guess what? In the same car to the police station again. That explains a one-directional transfer of fibers, but not everything. But it gets better. So the girl and her sister went to the police. She was questioned in this room. And after that, the guy was questioned there anyway. So I think it's our responsibility to make people in courts aware of what we found, if we have the background information. And so it's also a possibility to go further into details. We look at the likelihood approach. So based on Bayes' theory, evaluation is done in the framework of the case circumstances, and at least two propositions, hypotheses should be addressed. Often the prosecution versus the defense, and the role of the forensic expert is to express the probability of the findings according to a given hypothesis, and not the probability of the hypothesis according to the actual findings. So interpretation is a process on the way to a conclusion and statement. We need to take into account the background information and data, framework of the case, what has happened, what is alleged, then take in the observation and findings, combine it with personal experience, which is supported by other knowledge, colleagues, literature, studies, And I will give you another example, which is originating from Ray Palmer from the Forensic Science Service. It is a case where the purpose of the examination was to assist in determining whether or not either of the two subjects in question had worn the items of clothing discarded in an alleyway close to the burglary. So the interpretation follows this way. In order to assess the significance of the findings in this case, he has considered two proposals. Suspect 1 and Suspect 2 had been in recent contact with the code, number 1, and Suspect 1 and Suspect 2 had not been in recent contact with the code, and the findings are coincidental. So the results of published studies have consistently shown that the chances of finding significant numbers of a particular non-ubiquitous fiber type color combination on a random surface are extremely small. If Suspect 1 and 2 had not been in contact with the code, then I would not have expected to find fibers matching its lining on their clothing. Published studies have also shown that the majority of fibers transferred to a garment will be lost in the first 2 hours following contact. The results of the fiber analysis relating to Suspect 1 are what would be expected from a prolonged and relatively forceful contact with the lining of the coat, such as if he had worn the garment. I therefore consider there to be greater support for the first proposal than the second. So the conclusion, in Ray's opinion, the result of the examination in this case provide strong support for the view that Suspect 1 had been in recent contact with the code, and also strong support for the view that Suspect 2 had recently worn the code. So back to Paul Kirk, you remember that? So I think it's also a little bit free to interpretation, but I stick to the responsibility. And this is the way some labs in Europe go in the meantime. They take a logic approach, like in the Bayes approach, which not necessarily means that you have to deal with numbers. They look at cases from a broader perspective, and they move to the activity level. They don't only interpret the source level. They try to find out if the results fit into the actions taking place on the scene, and take on more responsibility this way. I think it is more difficult to do that, and I think it needs also lots of experience. But it is a way to go, and it is a possibility, because I feel that very often in Europe the courts are at a loss. What do the findings actually mean? And I always have the feel that they need quite some sort of interpreter, someone explaining the results. What do they mean in the context of the case? And that was what I wanted to give you to think. I thank you for your attention, and in the end want also to grab the opportunity to tell you that next year in The Hague, European Academy of Forensic Science meeting is taking place. There's a website, and yes, note that the date has changed. Thank you very much.